So welcome to the Agrii stand. We're going to be talking, my name's Amy first of all, and we've got Will Francis here as well, who's an agronomist, local agronomist in the area. We're going to be talking today about soil biology, cover crops, and also the sustainable farming incentive. So talking firstly about soil health, I know a lot of people now are actually trying to measure more parameters around soil health than ever before. Originally we always used to do the pH, pK, mag tests, but now people are starting to do a lot more organic matter testing. First of all is probably to cover on what the importance of soil organic matter is. For those of you who don't know, we're all measuring it now, but actually what the value of that score is that you get on that results sheet. There's a couple of points really agronomically to think about with the soil organic matter. Firstly is around water retention and drainage. So where you're increasing your soil organic matter, you're actually retaining water in the soil much better than where you've got a lower soil organic matter. The second point is around nutrition. So where you have a higher soil organic matter, it's actually also able to hold nutrients much better than where you've got a lower organic matter level. And that becomes really important, of course, when we talk around nitrogen and nitrogen use efficiency, which seems to be the latest buzzword in the industry. But because where you have higher soil organic matter, it's providing that food for the soil biology to thrive. And as we know, soil biology excretes really good stuff for what the crops need for growth and production. And that's all helping with aerating the soil, getting water through the system, and also nutrients too. The next part is, how do we actually measure it properly? And this is a question that we get a lot of questions about nowadays. There's people wanting to measure soil organic matter and carbon levels to potentially sell on carbon markets. There's also some people that want to do it, just have a look-see and see where they are and baseline. So if they are changing their system or cover cropping, for example, they can monitor any improvements. So depending on which route you want to go down will really depend on how you measure that soil organic matter. If you want the really simple answer, it's as simple as just adding it on your standard pH, pK, mag test that you're doing every 5 years. That can be a really good tick box just for baselining. However, if you're interested in selling on carbon markets, you really have to make sure you're following the right protocols there. And it isn't as simple as just going down to 15 centimetres like you normally do to measure your soil organic matter levels. Some schemes will require you to go down to 30 centimetres, some even deeper. So it's really important, if you're looking to do it for that reason, to make sure you know what that carbon company is after. So moving on from soil organic matter, and one of the main things, I guess, the incentives and the motives for people to measure this nowadays is really looking at the sustainable farming incentive. So we're now getting payments to actually measure soil organic matter and do soil management planning as well. Well, it's £5.80 a hectare per year, and it's a 3-year scheme for you to go out and do organic matter tests, to also do a couple of soil assessments if that's what you're looking to do across the farm, to help inform what you're writing in that soil management plan. The main thing to remember with SFI is that you've got to make sure that if you get an audit one day, you can demonstrate that whatever you've done, you're helping to achieve the aim of that standard. So when I think about SFI, I guess you could break it down into 3 different sections to make it really simple for you guys. The first one is making sure that you're focusing on those easy wins. So like we've just talked about, that soil management planning. Some of you might be doing that already, and soil organic matter testing. Another example is your nutrient management planning. So if you're in NVZ areas, or even for farming rules for water now, you've got to demonstrate that you're planning your nutrition. And then finally is the IPM plan. So a number of you will have been thinking about IPM at the back of your mind all the time. That's what we do really well as farmers, but actually monitoring that and putting it into a plan, either through the NFU plan or the VI plan as well. And you can get paid just shy of £1,000 a year to do your IPM plans now. Step 2 is taking advantage of those really obvious areas. So an example here would be around a certain area of the field which has always been underperforming every year, no matter what crop you put in it. And those are obvious areas to perhaps think about taking out of production and putting it into any wildflower strips, winter bird food, or anything under those standards that are additional there. And the third point is probably the hardest one, which everybody hates, which is doing your homework and actually doing a bit of research and looking at maybe your yield maps, your riser maps. If any of you aren't sure on riser as well, that's basically looking at precision farming mapping, your yield maps, your nutrition maps, and seeing actually over a couple of years what has happened, what are the trends on my yield maps that you can't maybe see to the eye, but you can start to see on NDVI imagery, etc. Now, comparison to countryside stewardship is a question I get asked quite a lot. Which one's better to go down? There's some standards that are quite similar. Payments might be slightly different, but quite similar. Which one should I go down? And the answer, there's not one answer that fits everybody, but in short, the SFI is much more flexible. It's only 3 years instead of 5. So if anybody's looking at maybe changing in a few years' time, the SFI might be a better option. We haven't touched much on private funding as well, but it is becoming more flexible and worth considering now, especially when we talk about stacking benefits with SFI. We're never going to replace the full BPS, but there is certain ways we can get up to that by stacking all these benefits. And carbon markets can be a component of that as well. I'll use an example with cover cropping here. So we've got £129 available under the SFI for cover cropping per hectare. So it's quite significant money available for cover cropping, when we're probably looking at a worst case scenario for cover crops is around £90 a hectare establishment, and that is worst case scenario. So some good profits to be made there from going under the SFI scheme. And then if you think about private sector funding, now this will vary considerably depending on what scheme you're going down. There's obviously Agrii here today, there's also Trinity Natural Capital Markets, there's also Soil Capital as well, and some others that are appearing throughout the UK, and they'll all offer different payment rates, they'll all offer different schemes and flexibility and durations. But if we take Agrii for an example, we've been doing some work with Agrii looking at, particularly on our trial sites, where we've got cover crops, how much could that add in terms of gross margin to the farm if you're entering it into a carbon market. And this was a scenario where we looked at cover crops versus no cover crops and how many credits would that earn us. And in total we equated it on this site to around 0.6 credits, which in money terms that's around £21 a hectare. Before I hand over to Will as well, I just wanted to touch a little bit on soil biology. We're talking about cover crops today, and obviously that's a key component of helping to make sure we can providing continuous food for soil biology over the winter period. There's two kind of, I guess I know we have earthworms that a lot of people use as an indicator for soil health, particularly soil biology, but there's two hidden gems that we can't see to the human eye, and it's really, really hard to test them because the up and down of the tests that we have available to us at the moment, which is the bacteria and fungi. With cover crops having those roots in the ground, because of the exudates that they're providing by putting carbon into the soil, they're helping feed that soil biology. Bacteria is a hidden gem mainly because of nitrogen cycling. So if we're thinking about the importance of these two things, bring it back to agronomy and nutrition. Your bacteria is really essential for cycling your nitrogen, making that available to the plant. Any nitrogen you're putting onto the soil, if you've got no bacteria in there or no soil biology, that's not being made available to that plant. So that's one importance of soil biology, of soil bacteria. The other one is fungi, and we'll talk particularly about Abusca mycorrhizal fungi, which seems again a massive buzzword at the moment. And the importance really for that is around phosphorus, and particularly with the farming rules for water now, where we have high P indices soils and are struggling to justify applying any manure or any phosphorus to the soil. Abusca mycorrhizal fungi is really important there to help unlock the phosphorus and make that available to the plant by creating that hyphal network that provides the phosphorus to those plant roots. It's essentially extending the plant roots throughout the soil to help them network with each other and provide it with phosphorus. So talking about soils, I'm going to hand over to Will. He's dug a soil pit here and pulled out some earthworms, the things that we can see, and talk a little bit about cover crops and the benefits they bring from the practical side as well.
I just want to touch on, as Amy was talking about, Abusca mycorrhizae. I've found an example here of some Abusca mycorrhizae. So I'll go round people. You see this white bit here, that's a plant root in the middle, and then those small white, it's almost like a cobweb that goes around that root. That's your Abusca mycorrhizae. So that's what you're looking for, the soil health indicator. You can see it here on that root there. It's almost like it's got a cobweb around it. So what it's doing is it's growing with and around the root. And what it's doing is, as it takes root exudates, which the plant delivers to it, and it gives that phosphorus back to the root in exchange for those sugars which the plant is giving to it. Now, Abusca mycorrhizae, as you can see from there, is very, very delicate stuff. It takes a long time to grow. There are different things, different crops that it likes and doesn't like. And then something else that I just want to talk about, and this is a bit hard to see. This is a key part of worms and aggregation caused by worms. I'll just go around. If you can see there, we've got the edge of a wormhole with a slight shine to it. Now what that is it's called glomalin. It's what the worms excrete. And that is very good at gluing soil aggregates together. It's the worm's excretia. It's quite sticky. What it does, it feeds soil biology and it helps create this aggregation. So the worms move through the aggregates, they pull it together, and that helps, like I say, create aggregation, and that's along with humus. So we've got our three types of worms. We've got the epigeic, endogeic, and here's the really important one. So epigeic, endogeic even, they go through the leaf litter at the top. The endogeic go slightly deeper. They're breaking down some of the bigger stuff, and these are the key. These are the powerhouse, and normally they're not so easy to find, but in this field here, they are the most abundant. So these are your anisic worms. See, they've got a dark head and a big saddle, and the reason that they have a dark head is what endogeic worms, instead of going horizontally, they work vertically. So what endogeic worms do, they go up and down within the soil structure, and part of their job is given away by their dark head. Because what they do, they'll come up out of the soil and they will grab around like this, and that dark head is actually camouflage, stop birds from seeing them. And they will grab stuff and they will pull it back, and you will see these worm middens, they're called, and you'll see small piles. So what I want to show you, we've got here some chopped cereal straw in here, and what I found, and where I found that, was at the bottom of this hole, and that is because those anisic worms are going up and pulling that stuff down into the soil. So they are absolutely key to bringing nutrients and bringing organic matter throughout the whole soil profile. And what you can sometimes see on heavily regen soils that don't have that high worm content is you can get a concentration of organic matter and nutrients in the top layer. So what we need to make sure is that we've got these worms working for us. And a big part of that is reducing compaction and avoiding periods where the soil is uncovered. Because what they're doing is working to bring nutrients down, and in a soil like this, which I don't know, Clive will probably agree, but it's got quite a low clay content. Yeah, so it's not very good at restructuring. So in soils that aren't very good at restructuring, the key part that gives the structure is the organic matter. So these worms are helping to bring organic matter up from the top down to a depth to help that soil restructure, to help it respire. The organic matter aids with the aggregation again, as the worm glomalin does. And what it allows as well is much more water to be held hydroscopically. So you may think that a soil with high organic matter is reasonably dry, but actually what you'll find is the water content is quite high. So how do we improve organic matter, and how do we make sure that we increase it in the most sustainable way possible without taking away from the crop? And one thing that is important to look at is the carbon-nitrogen ratio of the soil and the things that we input. So the ideal carbon-nitrogen ratio is 12 to 1. That's 12 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. And what we're looking to is, the best example that I can give is your compost bin in your garden at home. If you were to take something with a really low carbon nitrogen ratio, like a cabbage, it will break down incredibly quickly, because all the fuel that's in the cabbage is there to feed the biology that will break it down. So you're going to increase the organic matter, not very much, but you're going to increase it quickly because it breaks down quickly. And the other end of the scale, you've got, if you put newspaper or wood chippings into your compost bin, they're going to take a long time to break down because they don't have the fuel within themselves to break themselves down. So that's the best way that I can, and what you want is a mix. You want the cover crops like this Phacelia that I've pulled up, that'll break down incredibly quickly. It almost melts, it disappears. What you can see also is if you chop straw and that's your only input of organic matter, you're going to be actually beginning at some point to start taking away from the nitrogen in your field, because the bugs that are breaking down your organic matter and your organic inputs have to get their food from somewhere, and they're going to take it from your crop. So what we need is a mix. So you need, as you would if you were building a compost heap in your garden, you want your household waste, your food waste, which is your cover crops, which is your high nitrogen manures, and what you also want is some lower nitrogen carbon inputs, because they are bigger, they're bulkier, and they have the higher tonnage, if you like, to increase your organic matter. So that's something really important to think about when you're increasing your organic matter, is how quickly is it going to break down, how much carbon's actually in it to increase it, because these cover crops, they will have carbon in, but their carbon isn't huge. And that's why the best input in terms of a perfect ratio is normally FYM or compost for rapid increase. So with that in mind, just wanted to finish off by touching on what do we want these cover crops to do for us. So I've just gone out there and I've just picked 3 at random. So we've got a radish here, reasonably low carbon nitrogen ratio, but the root has quite a high carbon nitrogen ratio. They don't break down as quick, especially if you let them get larger and the sugars leave. Now what these are really good for, up to a point, let's not, they're not miracle workers in some soils, but they are very good at punching a hole and creating some tilth at depth. So you know, these tillage radishes, they've got great big roots and they will punch down a big hole and begin to fracture. The problem with that is that on some soils it's just not enough, and you've got to be aware of the limitations at times of a cover crop. Now this has got a lovely long root on it, but we need to be aware that actually sometimes if you've got a pan, you do have to go in with a subsoiler. Now this isn't the type of soil that would create a particularly horrific pan due to its makeup, but if you've got higher clay contents, it's perfectly capable to hold enough water and create pans. If you have a hard pan, this will not bust it, it will go flat. And you've got to remember as well, when you've got a pan, you're trying to break it this way, not this way. Now onto some Phacelia. This is one of my favourites, it's very pretty. Bees go absolutely wild for it. As you can see, a lot of very green top. As I said with the Phacelia before, just melts. It melts when it's sprayed off, if you spray it off at the right time. So what we're looking at with Phacelia, rather than any wild restructuring, because you can see that's a reasonably poor root structure, it's quite nice and it's gone quite deep, but that's not the goal. The goal is this huge amount of green captured nitrogen that is going to be given back to the crop extremely quickly. Now in terms of tillage, this is one of my favourites, and this is some linseed. Again, incredibly rapid growing, not the low carbon nitrogen ratio that the Phacelia has. It can go quite woody and take slightly longer to break down. If you look at the tillage that's created, it's been in exactly the same time as the other two, and that has created a beautiful tilth around that root. And that drilling area is going to be in beautiful condition to take a seed, to get good seed soil contact, and yeah, start your crop off in the best way possible. Buckwheat's a really good one, especially as a companion crop. And what we see with buckwheat in terms of synergistic effects, like I was saying about the Abusca mycorrhiza, rape is quite a lazy rooter. It really gets affected by pans. It doesn't like to just drive down, although by the end you get quite a long taproot. What we found is with the buckwheat, which main purpose from the start was to to hide and be a companion crop to distract the flea beetle, which it does do a good job of. What we found going further is that buckwheat is very good in the same way that mycorrhiza is good at mineralising phosphate. The buckwheat is actually really good at mineralising potash for the rape. And what happens is the buckwheat is a very rapid rooter. It roots very strongly and very deeply quick. And what you find if you dig a buckwheat plant and a rape plant up next to each other, you'll find that the buckwheat has punched a hole, and within that hole and that tilth that the buckwheat's created, you'll see the rape taproot going down through. And that's something to think about when you talk about companion cropping in SFI, as we spoke about. That's a really good one to get a quick win with measurable agronomic benefits. I say measurable, but with agronomic benefits in terms of keeping pests off and in terms of punching a hole and mineralising phosphate. And all of this information is encompassed within Agrii's SRS system. So that's our in-house system. I'm one of the SRS advisors as well, and an agronomist. And what we do is we take all of this information, come into your field, dig these holes, do worm counts. We use a blue dye to measure infiltration. And what you get back is a report with some actionable prescriptions, if you like, recommendations for what you could do to improve your soil biology, soil health, yield, outcomes. It fits into the SFI as a soil plan. It's very useful if you want to benchmark year on year, and it's also useful if you are renting out land and want to see the effect that contractors and people coming in and renting your land are having. That's something we see more and more of from the land agents, things like that, is actually what effect is renting land out for maize or potatoes having on our nice soil, and is it worth doing? Is there some way to build in some remuneration to those contracts? So yeah, thank you very much, folks.